Now let's jump into a product improvement question. Let's say you're a product manager on Facebook Marketplace. Your whole job is to keep these buyers and sellers safe and prevent any scams that happen on the platform. Can you think of 5 different ways in which you could come up with different technical, like integrity safeguards to implement to help achieve this goal?
All right, so just to repeat the question, I'm in charge of safe and trust and security of Facebook Marketplace. I want to be coming up with safeguards to prevent scams and build trustworthiness in Facebook Marketplace as a whole from a tech perspective.
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Great. So I always like to start these questions with understanding the goals of the company and my team and what I'm trying to build. And so first we should think about Facebook as a whole and Facebook Marketplace. In general, with Facebook Marketplace, the goal is to maximize revenue with peer-to-peer sales. So you want to get as healthy as a marketplace, both on the seller and the buyer side. Facebook in general, we know, is really focused about connection between others and leveraging Facebook as a way to do more and more activities and deepen that engagement, which is consistent again with Marketplace. We want to build that marketplace and use Facebook as a way to drive those sales. I think there's an interesting side goal here as well in terms of payments and using Facebook more and more in the payment space, which can unlock a number of scenarios for Facebook and for users as a whole, which we can talk about a little bit later. So just to summarize everything, if our goal is to maximize revenue, grow engagement and connection, and then think about the payment space, now we're going to go into actually brainstorming some of the different solutions that we can build to increase safety, trustworthiness, and prevent any scams on the marketplace. Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. I like that framework. Let's jump right in.
Cool.
Allison did a great job establishing product-level goals at the start of her response. She then took it a step further by tying in the product goal to the broader company mission. For larger companies, especially FAANG companies, it's important to tie your product goals to the company's mission up front, especially for products like Facebook Marketplace, which veers a bit further away from the social connectivity platform that people usually think of when you mention Facebook. Notice how Allison identifies something that can serve as a bridge between social networking and e-commerce: payments.
So let's start with thinking about the other players in the space. There's a number of different offerings that allow these marketplaces to thrive today. eBay is one of them. OfferUp, a number of smaller exchange marketplaces similar to OfferUp exists today. The biggest one, I think the most canonical example, is Craigslist. And Craigslist is a great example too because there is very limited safety and security in that, but there's a high number of users that are still using Craigslist as the predominant place to exchange goods. So I think that's a really great place to ground to prove the value that Facebook can add on top of Craigslist. So with that, I'm going to go into the strengths and weaknesses of Craigslist. If I think about my own experiences of using Craigslist, which I predominantly use it for retro game sales, both in selling like my old Atari, but also buying new games, I think it kind of breaks down into a few different areas. There's the other person from either the seller or the buyer perspective, the realness, the trustworthiness, and the intentions of that person. There's the product itself, the authenticity, and the quality of that product. Does it live up to what the seller says that it is? There's all of the details around the transaction. So once we've agreed to do this transaction, how does it actually happen from a money and location perspective? And then there's a common thread across all of these, which is the ability to do recourse. And this is an area where Craigslist has no ability to do recourse. So I think it's interesting to sort of think about all of these areas with that lens. Does that sound like the right areas to focus on?
Yeah, I like those 4 or so categories that you proposed. Let's dive deeper into each one and look at those pain points more. Allison provided a strong competitive analysis of eBay, OfferUp, and most importantly, Craigslist. When brainstorming features or product ideas, it's a good idea to draw on your personal experience with other products in the space to identify openings in the market. By establishing that she has used platforms like Craigslist, OfferUp, and eBay, Allison shows that she's within the target market for Facebook Marketplace, and so her opinions about what could be an ideal experience carry more weight.
Okay, great. So we'll start with the safeness and the realness of the other person. There's a few pieces that I think about here, and I think it's more starting with the trustworthiness of the other person. One of the big humps to get over when you're looking at a product is, okay, I'm gonna have to eventually meet this person face to face. Like, what are their intentions and what is their reputation? On Craigslist today, all I have is some auto-generated user ID. I might have an email, I might have a phone number, but I have no ability to understand who this person is and then how they have acted in the past. And this is where Facebook can actually do quite a bit because we already have the profile pages and we presumably have a history of previous transactions that we can use to leverage reviews from that recourse perspective. And so you can think about, as a buyer, I can look at a user's Facebook profile page and understand generally who they are as a person. Are they someone that I know or know from another friend? And do I feel good about this? I think there's a number of challenges, especially from the privacy perspective, of the information that I want to share on my Facebook profile page to a friend versus someone that I want to share as a seller to someone buying my product are very different. So you can think about a way of taking the profile page and swapping it into a seller-focused view that has just the most relevant information that avoids any sort of bias in the marketplace. The other piece is, like, how do I actually get in contact with this person and start getting the next level of details? And I think a lot can be surmised from having this conversation back and forth. With Craigslist, again, it's hard because it's just email or sometimes you get that phone number. With Facebook, we have a strategic advantage here in two ways. One is the leveraging Messenger for having this like real-time back and forth, asynchronous, super fast communication style. And then you can go a step further by making them the one-off Messenger threads. I don't need to be this person's friend. I can remove myself from the situation at any time if things are not going towards where I want. So having that ability of control as a buyer and being able to leverage the seller pages or seller profile pages that have reviews and basic information about this person, I think is the best way that we can add security from the person perspective. And Craigslist doesn't allow any of that security or trust today.
Allison just identified some of the biggest weaknesses of Craigslist and how Facebook can use them to its advantage. With Craigslist, there's no names, there are no reviews, and there's very little trust. Facebook, on the other hand, has the potential to offer all of this and more. Still, notice the nuance of Allison's answer. She doesn't just say that Facebook Marketplace should list every seller's full social profile. That could cause safety risks, since if you're selling a lot of high-ticket items from your home, revealing too much about your seller information could put you in danger. Allison is careful to call out that there should be some sort of special commerce profile that shares just enough information about both buyers and sellers to build trust, without sharing so much information that it adds new safety and privacy risks.
Next, I'm going to go into product. And so I think there's a few different things to think about from the product perspective. One is, great, like I see a photo of this product. Does the person actually own this? Is there like this same picture all across the internet? There's also like the quality of the product itself. I'd like to first talk about the actual ownership piece. So there's a few things that Facebook can do here. And again, thinking about Facebook leveraging a lot of its computer vision understanding and its ability to push users to have that deeper engagement and create the media that we want them to. So you can think about, to prove that I actually own this product, the first step is like, is this photo posted a lot of places on the internet and just a representative for a product that actually doesn't exist for the seller? Pretty basic computer vision algorithms that you can bring into there. But there's also having the seller post a specific photo of the product with something like a date card next to it, or asking the seller to increase their listing quality by doing and taking these actions. And we already have integrated camera support within the app, So lowering that barrier of entry to create this high quality listing is much easier than Craigslist, which is all desktop web based.
Computer vision is a great solution to stop scammy sellers who don't actually have the product they listed. This feature is relatively straightforward for a tech company like Facebook to implement, given how much computer vision and machine learning tech the company has already developed for content moderation. But it would be near impossible for Craigslist to implement, and even still difficult for smaller tech companies like OfferUp and eBay. This suggestion showcases Allison's ability to brainstorm technical features that can move the needle and can be implemented quickly and seamlessly, while also serving as a moat against competitors. Also, pay attention to how Allison broke down her suggestion into parts. First, she mentioned the MVP, or minimum viable product, of just checking if the image is being used as a stock image readily available on the web. She then painted a vision of a more powerful but engineering-heavy solution of having the seller upload the photo with today's date on it, and how this would provide even more security but would take much more time to build.
So that sort of covers the, do they actually own it? How do we make sure these photos are representative of the real product, not just a representative product? And then how do you verify the quality? Quality is really interesting because it really depends on the type of product that you're buying. For example, if I'm trying to buy a new sweater, what I care about is it clean? Are there holes in it? Generally, like, does it fit the way that I would expect it to? And for that piece, you can really leverage more video-based media of having someone actually wear it, having them show and flip it around, walk around the product. From the higher ticket items, and especially electronics, the things you care about is like, okay, great, like, does this actually function? Can I see a demo of it happening in practice? So when I like plug in the Atari from the 80s, does it turn on? Does it boot from the disk? Can I play the video games that you say are along with this package? And I wonder if there's a way to leverage social networks as part of this verification perspective. So if I know that this seller has similar connections to me, friends of friends, can I use those friends to vouch for the product? You could also think about, well, that social network overlap might be relatively small. Sure, there are some products where I might have a friend of a friend, but the vast majority of them, I likely do not have any direct connections with this person. And so is there a world where we can have sort of a voucher system or moderator of certain high-level items? I think specifically about a Facebook group today, Seattle Music Gear Swap, where you have a set of moderators who are actually pretty deeply involved and make sure that all the listings that are coming through that channel are high quality and vetted. So I think that's a really powerful way of leveraging these connections and trusted people, whether they're friends or some sort of moderator force, for the bigger ticket items.
Awesome, yeah, I love that. I think that's a good overview of the person, the product, those two categories. I'm interested to see how you think about the transactions and the recourse.
Great. So from transactions, I'd like to break this down into two areas. One is the money piece of the transaction, and then one is the physicality, or actually doing that object to money handoff. From the money perspective, there's a few different pieces. Like, I think the biggest concern that users typically have in these marketplaces is, are they going to take my money and run? And further, if you think about the challenges of Craigslist a lot of times is cash-based, because you want to have that as anonymous as possible. So giving someone a Venmo, there's a lot of challenges there. And so showing up to a transaction with a lot of cash puts you at risk as a buyer. And so you really want to minimize that as much as possible. Facebook here has a pretty strategic advantage with the online payments. And there's a few different ways that we can take this. One is, like, you can think about leveraging third-party apps like Venmo, PayPal, etc. as part of Facebook Marketplace. But in general, we as Facebook really want to push people to integrate with the Facebook payment system, not only for this transaction, but for the next transaction, or any sort of future engagement that we want to have for one-click purchases when I'm browsing the home feed, or increasing our marketplace to be more service-based and partner with businesses to have more of a delivery service within Facebook. So I think in general, we should push users as much as possible to Facebook payment system, but have the options to integrate with other systems if necessary. That's from the money perspective. I think location is a pretty big challenge, and this is one where Craigslist and Facebook is probably about the same. Facebook doesn't have any sort of physical presence that we can rely on, similar to Craigslist. And so how do you get over this hump of like, oh, I now have to organize my time with the other person, find a good location to drop off, or it might be in like very different parts of the state. We don't have a great solution for that, but I wonder if there's a way to partner either with businesses or a company like Amazon to leverage Dropboxes, or to leverage potentially UPS offices or something else, where we can have that exchange set up in a more safe and secure way. For this one, I think specifically about my traveling in Europe, where I was able to pick up keys for my Airbnb at a local store that was a trusted handoff, and I could show up at any time, rather than meeting my Airbnb host at a very specific time when I didn't know when I would get there from my flight and train and travel in. So I think if that could be value on top. That's not the place that I would start, but I think that there could be a really interesting way of proving value from the Facebook Marketplace there.
Allison did something 9 out of 10 candidates here would miss. She thought beyond software features and came up with interesting concepts for refining the in-person commerce experience. She drew on a travel experience where she could pick up keys for her Airbnb from a Dropbox at a local convenience store. Partnerships with physical businesses like this are very possible for companies the size of Facebook to do, but very hard for smaller companies. Being able to think of ideas that can leverage Facebook's massive partnership and business development teams is exactly the sort of thing you'll need to go from being a hire to a strong hire candidate.
That covers transaction. Any questions about that before I move on to recourse?
No, I think that makes sense. Let's finish up recourse, and then I do have a few follow-up questions.
Okay, great. So from the recourse perspective, we think about trusting the person, we think about trusting the product, and then we think about having a trusted transaction at the end of the day. And so there's a few things that Craigslist has completely no support for today. If I get ripped off, like say the product doesn't actually work, there's no way to get a refund. There's no way to say that like this person's a bad seller, because they can just go get a new email or a new account very easily on Craigslist. And so this is where I think Facebook has a number of ways to better enforce this recourse and build a more trusted marketplace overall. One of which is the seller and these buyer pages, to have reviews of like, yes, this person was responsive to my messages, they showed up at the right time, and they gave me a high quality product. That gives a very powerful signal for future buyers and sellers on both sides of the transaction. So that's from the ripped off perspective. I think the refund one is a harder one, because unless you have Facebook as a middle person between this transaction, there's not much you can do to validate that this claim is real, one side or the other. Say that the seller didn't get as much money as they had agreed on, or the buyer got a product that didn't meet the expectations of the listing. I wonder if there's an interesting way to further push users to the Facebook payment system by leveraging this as an advantage. By using Facebook payment system, we have a guarantee of sorts where we will link you up with a customer service representative to do an investigation when things go wrong and to get your money back. I think there's a lot of details there of how that could work, but that could be a really interesting way of pushing people and getting more credit cards and payment information into our system, as well as adding that extra layer of security and trust that we would not be able to do with third-party integrations.
Awesome, yeah. So I think you listed a lot of structure here. You talked through all of these different personas and also walked through the type of the just the stages of the process that you're going with, or the different things you're considering, the pain points, and then how we can actually think through some of the things that Facebook could do. How would you prioritize this list? Because ultimately, if you remember, we as a team can only build 5 features. So what are the top 5 features that you would choose out of this list?
Yeah. So let's think through the different areas. We talked about the person, we talked about the product, we talked about the transaction, and then we talked about the recourse. In general, when I think about prioritization, I think about what are the things that are going to build the most trust and empower the most amount of transactions. Generally, our goal is to maximize revenue with sales and to grow engagement with users on Facebook and push more users into or help build the Facebook presence in the payment space. And so, as such, the features that I would think about, like one, having those seller buyer pages with reviews and the right level of information from a privacy perspective, I think is one of the best things that we can build to build that trust up front in the transaction piece. And so I would count that as one strong feature there. The second piece is the communication feature, and for that I think about the one-time messenger thread. How do we make that experience as frictionless as possible to get connected, to get that deeper level of information, and then to also build in and figure out the details for how we actually make the transaction. The third piece that I would think about is just in general, how do we light up those online payments to make it really easy to transition money one way or the other. And the fourth feature that is tied along to that online payment system is like the recourse. So recourse can also appear in the reviews on the buyer and seller pages that I mentioned first. But as part of online payments, how do we build that super secure handoff when things go wrong that we can follow up and provide that extra layer of confidence? The fifth area that I would think about is how do we use and leverage media and then incentivize sellers to create high quality listings with good media. So whether that's pushing them to take more photos, more comprehensive photos, more relevant photos, and prove that these are photos within their space and that they own the product, is a way at the upper end of the funnel for users to trust the listings that they see on the marketplace to get them from browse to actual purchase.
Notice the 5 things Allison chooses to prioritize. Although she has some really novel ideas like leveraging computer vision to validate listed photos and partnerships to secure physical locations for more secure drop-off points, she realizes that these ideas aren't the most important for the MVP. She notices that some features are table stakes, such as buyer and seller pages and seamless communication channels, yet they still have a lot of room for improvement. Allison did a great job sharing both the straightforward and the big picture ideas in the same brainstorming session. We as the interviewer now know that Allison can both think through big ideas but also prioritize ruthlessly. Allison opted for a more conversational response when listing her 5 features. However, her answer could have been made even stronger had Allison applied a framework or table such as t-shirt sizing, the engineering difficulty of the project, and the potential impact of each idea. Having this visual reference for weighing and evaluating the different ideas presented can be helpful for the interviewer who might be trying to frantically take notes of all of your awesome ideas for their write-up. If you whiteboard up a table, your interviewer can just take a photo or screenshot it and share it with the hiring manager directly. They can then spend less time frantically scribbling down notes and more time paying attention to your response. And would you just do photos, or I know earlier you had also mentioned that having to build that trust, you would want to see the quality, you would want to see whether it actually works and validate that with a video. Is that something you would also consider here?
Yes, I misspoke when I said photos. I'm using photos as a general media sense, so I think photos and videos together photos and videos leveraged together tell a really powerful story because videos have that ability to communicate space. And over time, yes, this thing works or it fits the way that I want it to fit.
Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for that. And to end, is there anything that you can see risky with this proposal? Anything that you want to call out that you might have missed earlier?
The area that gives me the most pause, and I think will take a lot of nuance to really build in correctly, is how do you figure out the right level of information to expose on these seller and these buyer pages? There's a lot of challenges with data and information because everyone is viewing data and information through their own lens. So you have to make sure that you're not introducing any bias or discrimination in your marketplace by exposing different types of data. And this is a challenge that we've seen in a number of marketplaces, Airbnb being one of the biggest ones in terms of racism or classism or otherwise. So thinking about leveraging the right information from a review perspective, maybe like a bio or description that's written out, but staying away from photos of the person itself, because at the end of the day, like the actual visual appearance of a person isn't a good indication of whether that is a trustworthy person, and we don't want to lead users down that path, would be the area where I'd spend the most amount of time validating, understanding, like how do we position that correctly.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really relevant insight, especially with what we've seen happen with other platforms like Airbnb, like you noticed. And not only do we want to make sure that this happens because from a value standpoint, it also affects the PR and the perception that people have when they interact with Marketplace. So good call out. Thank you for that answer. So this question is an interesting question because you have to think through a lot of things, and Allison did a great job at this. She started out with identifying the goals, then walking through the competitors and what's wrong in their experience. And then she took all of these thoughts that she had in her brain and she mapped them into an easy to understand chart. She talked about the funnel when you go through this process. First, you're curious about the person you're interacting with, so there's the people aspect of it. Then there's the product that you're inquiring about and how reliable it is and if it's authentic. Then it's the actual transaction, and then there's recourse in case something goes wrong. And she identified in each of these stages what the pain points are and how Facebook can help. And after identifying all of this, she went back and prioritized certain things that she would focus on, the 5 things to help build trust and safety, and at the same time identified a risk in the biases that a lot of platforms, similar platforms face when matching markets and exposing a lot of personal information. All of this was done fantastically in a structured way. One very, very small thing that would have made this answer a little bit better was when she was talking about transactions, she mentioned a very, very powerful key insight here about how if Facebook controlled the end-to-end transaction, you use Facebook payments, then you could also have a way of validating if something went wrong and then have an option for a refund in the case of a recourse if something like actually went wrong. This is really powerful if you had tied this back to a high-level strategic goal of Facebook. If you look at the last 5-7 years, Facebook has been trying to copy the WeChat model of becoming the one app and building an ecosystem of products and services around it that people tie into. And the reason why WeChat is able to do this is because they were able to link credit card and payment information into the app. And so later, as they started launching a dating service, as they had a TaskRabbit, as they had ride sharing, as they had the ability to buy products and order services all around, they were able to easily do that because people had already trusted them with their key payment information. And so now they're able to create an ecosystem of products around it and be this booming business in many, many segments. Now, Facebook has been trying to do this, but hasn't been able to succeed with it. And so that's why they launched the Facebook Shops product to promote e-commerce on the platform, get a lot of these mom and pop shops, independent sellers to list on there so you can start getting e-commerce and direct listings on the Facebook product. And similarly with Marketplace, if you were able to offer a differentiated feature by using Facebook payments, then that would be extremely powerful. Like, for example, if you use Facebook payments over Venmo or Cash or a credit card, or some other that's linked to some other platform like Apple Pay, then you would be able to offer them the ability for Facebook to actually investigate what actually happened and give you a refund in the case that something goes wrong. And that's a really powerful assurance that Facebook can provide, and it serves as an easy way to hook people and get them to adopt the Facebook Payments platform. Because if I can choose Venmo or Facebook Payments, but only one of those payment methods is going to give me recourse if something happens in my transaction, I will choose that platform. And now you can start getting attached on your user base and getting them to sign up for this new payment system. And later on, this ties into the strategic goals that Facebook is investing in. So just calling that out and mentioning that story and how this ties into the higher level goals would have been really powerful.
You might be wondering where all the voiceover commentary, analysis, and feedback in this interview lesson came from. Well, this is one of over 70 such lessons we conducted, and in each, we had a rotating panel of 4 calibrated PM interviewers from top companies to analyze, dissect, and critique the interviewer's answer. And then we inserted these insights at key moments during the interview. In Product Alliance's Hacking the PM interview course, you'll get access to all 70+ interview lessons, complete with whiteboard graphics and expert commentary where you saw here. You'll also get step-by-step tutorials to teach you exactly how to ace each of the 17 types of PM interview questions. Unlike our competitors, we do not offer interview courses for every job under the sun, from software engineering to management consulting. We do one thing and one thing only, creating the best and the highest quality, most up-to-date PM interview resources on the planet. Remember that this video is just the tip of the iceberg. Check out the full Hacking the PM interview course to get every single resource you need to land your dream product job.